My name is Erin Manalo-Perez. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And as Luis said earlier, I am a doctoral student at UCLA in the Community Health Sciences Department at the Fielding School of Public Health. And I actually used to work with the Health Careers Opportunity Program or the Allied Health Academy before I started my PhD program. So this is actually a photo of me pre-pandemic here in front of KHS 115. Not sure how many folks have been able to get around campus, but is anyone here taking classes in KHS? No. Okay, no worries. All right. So the name of this workshop today is It's Not You, It's the Institution, Navigating Imposter Syndrome with Community Cultural Wealth. And here is a photo of an orchard, I believe in Riverside, with a sign, sorry, it's a little bit covered by the text that says, no trespassing. And I know sometimes it feels like when you're an imposter, maybe you were trespassing into groups that you had no business being in. And so we're gonna try to unpack that today and also talk about our experiences and whatnot, managing and navigating through imposter syndrome. So yes, as Luis said, this is expected to be an interactive workshop. So definitely understand if you're not able to turn on your videos, but I hope you can participate through the text, through the chat, and also we'll be having breakout rooms later. But basically what we'll cover today is trying to get towards the answers of several questions. So how do you handle the demands of grad school when you feel like an imposter? We'll start off with thinking with the thought, I don't even know how I got here. What experiences led you to this moment? The second one being, I don't belong here. What does imposter syndrome feel like? Third, we were not meant to be here. Why do we feel this way? We know things. What strengths do we have? And closing out with, we will find our way. How do we prepare for the journey ahead? So again, please prepare yourselves to reflect and share. Thank you. Okay, so to get started, I don't even know how I got here. What experiences led to this moment? So if folks could start off by responding in the chat, if you're able to, please include your name, pronouns, grad program, and where you're joining from. And I'll give some folks some time to respond. Cool. We got psychology. Thanks, Rich. Andrew, MBA. I won't read everyone's, but thank you for taking the time to share. Anybody getting their master's in public health? MPA, Econ, MSEE. Is that electrical engineering? Nice. Okay, cool. We got quite a diverse mix of disciplines. So there might be some approaches to engaging that may not be the same as what you're used to in class, perhaps. But I really hope that y'all can participate to the extent that you can. So, oh yay, MSW. Um, is Dave Chanel still? Oh, he's not the chair anymore. Never mind. But yeah, I used to work with Dave Chanel. Ooh, EDD. I used to work with Dr. P. She was our evaluator for the grant that I worked on. Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm going to share about myself, and I'm hoping that you all will also share more about yourselves as well. So starting off, who am I and how did I get here? Why should you listen to me? Why would you listen to me? So with regards to where I come from, I am the daughter of immigrants from the Philippines, and I've lived in Southern California my whole life. I'm also a mother to an almost 3-year-old, which I guess you can't see. There she is, who I was pregnant with right before I left Cal State Fullerton. And the first time I ever went to Cal State Fullerton was in college. I went to Cal Poly Pomona and was involved in the Filipino club, and not sure if anyone also went to undergrad at Cal State Fullerton, but the Filipino club at Cal State Fullerton hosts this like annual event called Friendship Games. And that was the first time I ever went to campus. It was the first time I saw so many Filipino American students all in one space. And so in college, I did major in business, computer information systems. So shout out to the MBA folks in econ. But kind of like after I got my degree, I started working in the field. I was a consultant, and concurrently with developing more experience in the field, I was noticing that I wasn't able to prioritize my own well-being. I found myself dealing with substance use and mental health challenges and not really sure how to like navigate that. And so in my process of trying to heal, I co-founded the Lacoste Mentorship Program based out of Chino Hills to try to prevent some of the feelings of uncertainty that I had experienced by creating an alternate space or a counter space for high school students. And so this photo down here was when we took our first cohort of students all the way to Los Angeles to visit historic Filipino town. And, you know, Chino Hills is not that far away from LA, although, you know, of course, with traffic, it could take forever. But these students, even though they were around other Filipinos, were not aware that the historic Filipino town existed, or that there were issues like the World War II veterans who didn't get equitable benefits. And so it was really a process of learning about community. And so I realized through doing this community work, I didn't want to be a consultant anymore. And I found out about public health. I had no idea how to navigate graduate school and didn't really plan to do so during my undergrad. But my partner, who's now my husband, he had graduated, or he participated in McNair when he was in college, and they helped him to apply. And he did his master's in Asian American Studies from SF State. And it was through what he found out through McNair that he shared with me that I learned how to go through the process, studying for the GRE, trying to write a statement. And it was really through his knowledge that I was able to navigate. I got into the master's in public health at UCLA in the Fielding School of Public Health. And I was able to participate in the minority training program in cancer control research. So this was back in 2015. I'm right there. And this is the famous bear. And And basically, this was the very first time out of all my years of education where I felt that my story mattered and that it made a difference to the research that I was doing, right? My perspective wasn't represented in the public health curriculum that I had been learning. And it was just by chance that my partner had participated in McNair and was able to navigate the grad school application process, right? And so that brought me to Cal State Fullerton. It was actually an internship that I did while involved in the minority training program in cancer control research that brought me to work with Dr. Sora Tanjasiri and this amazing, amazing group of folks who were similarly trying to create a space where students who are first generation college students from low income backgrounds, from racially excluded groups, to find each other and gain the resources to navigate. Okay. And it was through that process that I realized that I wanted to come back and get my doctorate because I view education as a determinant of health, and not just the more education you get, the better your health is, but what is it that we're actually learning that can help us to understand ourselves and the real issues at the root of health inequities. So why am I here talking to you right now? So as I mentioned, I study structural racism and research how education harms and heals students and communities of color. I enjoy sharing ideas, resources, connecting with other graduate students. And kind of as I shared earlier, I do think that the resources that we share with grad students are in ways public health intervention to reduce stress and also, get folks to the goals that they want. Also, and I wish someone gave me this workshop when I was a grad student. Okay, so your turn. I'm not gonna make you share out, but it says 10 minutes here. Maybe we can start off with 5. And this will just be an individual writing prompt, so no need to feel shy. But please take the next 5 to 10 minutes to reflect. How did you get here? I mean, I shared my story, but it's taken me multiple times thinking about how it was that I came to this point. You probably had to write a statement of purpose against to your master's program, right? Or the EDD. But how did you really get here? Think about the experiences that led you to this moment, that led you to this choice to pursue the field that you're in. So I will play some music and check in at in about 5 minutes. While you do not have to share what you wrote, the later activities will build upon what you're doing right now. So please do it. Thanks. All right, I know I said right until 6:30, but I'm wondering if folks need more time or if well, give a thumbs up if you're good to move on. Hopefully you can do a thumbs up. Right, we got a couple folks, 3. Okay, no worries. We'll keep going for a couple more minutes and then we'll continue. All right, so start to wrap up your last thoughts. And if you're already done, just close your eyes. Close your eyes, take a deep breath. I know there's not a lot of moments that we get to pause during our day, especially as grad students. But thanks, folks, for participating. All right, go ahead and close it off. All right, so thank you for taking the moment to write and think through what got you here. Okay, so now that you've thought about what it took to get here, let's start talking about imposter syndrome. I don't belong here. What does imposter syndrome feel like? So right now, year 3 in the PhD program, I'm proud to share that I have $0 in student loans to pay. I have 3 publications where I'm first or second author. I have a community of scholarly colleagues or kasamas who see me and challenge me, and I find myself telling my public health colleagues about interdisciplinary theories. But at the start, I didn't have any of that. I only had 1 year of funding, which covered tuition and stipend, and a lot of times the advice when going into a doctoral program is make sure you have a good funding package so that you can focus on your research rather than trying to find different ways to fund your education. I had 0 publications, and a lot of that was because the Master's in Public Health degree is very applied, and in my program, we didn't have to write a thesis or anything. I was doing a lot of work at Cal State Fullerton, evaluating and working with Serial and Dr. Person in the School of Education, as well as folks in HHD, but we did conference presentations. We didn't submit to journals. Also, I found that when I was telling people that I wanted to study how education harms and heals, people were like, well, what do you mean by ethnic studies heals, is healing, saves lives? Like, how do you quantify that? When I talked about structural violence and being excluded from curriculum, people were like, I don't know if that's violence. And this was at the very start of my program. We actually met in person before the pandemic, and I was finding that in some of my classes, people would say names or use jargon, and I'm like, what does that mean? Let me look that up online real quick so I can stay up to date with what's going on. So for me, I think a lot of times people will talk about their wins and their successes and how they've gotten to where they're at without reflecting on how they started and the different ways, the different struggles that they reached to get to their next place. So if you don't mind sharing just a couple thoughts, how does imposter syndrome show up for you? I'm assuming that there's some level of imposter syndrome that you've been feeling, unless you're just here because, I don't know, they made you. But if folks feel inclined to just share from your perspective in the chat briefly, like, oops, what does that look like for you? Is it comparing yourself to other people? And I recognize this is vulnerable, so. I've noticed that PIs are not they're not the most kind with their feedback. Yeah, I totally feel that. I also feel like, oh, am I behind the curve, right? Like, oh man, other people probably studied these things like in undergrad, or when they were in undergrad, they were on research, or they were in research labs. And one of my colleagues, he's about to graduate, and he has 16 publications, half of which are first authored, right? Feeling like you have to keep proving yourself, ostracized. Ooh, yes, the big school elitism is real. Ooh, yes. And also, like, because we're in graduate school, sometimes there's like this emphasis on, oh, well, what have you published, or what is your body of research, without really thinking, well, look at all this professional work that I've done, right? That has to count for something, right? That's actually like on the ground working with communities and students and whatnot. Oh no. Wow. Thank you for being honest about so many things here. Being at a minority serving institution that tends to be still a predominantly white staff, right? I'm so sorry to hear that you were laughed at, but look at you now. You're in a grad program, right? Everyone here. Yeah, these are all very, very, very real fears, right? And real concerns. But hopefully kind of what we'll talk through in the next few minutes is like, how do we navigate these? How do we understand these? How do we find the resources so that we feel more confident in our ability to get to where we want to go, right? And it's not about like that we are not enough, right? But it's like, how do we reframe our thinking, and how do we avoid struggling alone, right? Because I think for me, a lot of it is like, oh, everybody is like doing so great and they have these long CVs, and like I came in with zero publication experience. Like I don't want to admit that I don't know how to run this code, right? But it's really in the process of us being honest and vulnerable, right, that we're able to find out other people don't know what's going on either. Oh, sorry, that looks weird. So some of you may have seen a figure like this before of imposter syndrome. Sometimes you feel like you only know this much, and then everybody knows like so many other things. But in reality, everybody knows stuff, right? And you know a little bit of what everyone else knows, but it's just like that feeling of when you are in these spaces where it's really about sharing knowledge, you're realizing, oh, wow, I have a lot to learn. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. You're here to learn, right? And so the imposter phenomenon, and I didn't know this until I prepared for this workshop. This was actually theorized back in like 1978 by Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes about high achieving women in the workplace and how they felt like they still were not enough despite doing all of these things. But I think it's not just a reframing of like, oh, I need to work harder or, you know, have more grace for myself. Yes, that, but also there are larger like societal factors that shape our experiences in grad school. So for this next section, we're not supposed to be here. Why do we feel this way? Ooh, that looks weird. Okay. So this came out in the Harvard Business Review last year. Stop telling women they have imposter syndrome. For many women, feeling like an outsider isn't an illusion. It's the result of systemic bias and exclusion. So sometimes I hear a frequent response of like, oh, everybody feels like an imposter, right? And I agree that everyone probably has some sense of vulnerability and difficulty and need to learn how to grow. But we also need to acknowledge that there are different forms of power that will shape what things are appreciated in the workplace, in graduate school, and so on. So I don't know if anyone's read this, but this is like my favorite book. So Prisca Dorcas Mojica Rodriguez, the founder of Latina Rebels, wrote this book called For Brown Girls with Sharp Edges and Tender Hearts, a love letter to women of color. I'm not Latina, but I appreciate a lot of the Chicana feminist and Latina feminist approaches to sharing knowledge. And so read this book if you can before you finish grad school. But I just wanted to share a clip of kind of the reframing that she gets to here.
Oh, dear brown girl, you are eternal. You carry the cultura in your veins and academia in your heart. You have not forgotten your origins, but you have learned and earned your way into spaces not meant for you. You are poderosa like that. You've seen the way that colorism can dictate simple decisions like whether you should go to the beach again, and you defy those norms. Because once you've heard your chains rattle, you can't unhear them. You felt the crush of the male gaze. Partners have tried to pin you down. They have tried to claim you, but you've resisted because you're not meant to belong to anyone but yourself. You are magical. Your parents beg you to be more like their friends, well-behaved daughters, but you resist the false security of respectability politics. You're unstoppable. White fragility will cut you in places you didn't even know could bleed this profusely. So make sure that you've surrounded yourself with others who will pick you up and light you back up again. Because brown girl, we need each other.
right, so thanks for sitting through that with me. Glad to hear that Marisol read it, enjoyed it, cried about it. Because yeah, I think there is a level of needing to understand we were not supposed to be here, right? That's why we feel like we don't belong, because these institutions were not made for us. Oh, that looks funny, sorry. Yeah, so this is Priska picture of her, and her quote here, oops, sorry for the weird formatting. She says, "You see, what I was missing was that I was trying to find worth and validation from an institution designed for white intellectuals. The ivory tower is ivory for a reason. It is not ebony, it is not the color of honey, nor the color of café con leche, and I was never meant to thrive there. Until I understood that my validation was not going to come from my predominantly white institution, I was going to keep struggling." Not sure if folks are familiar with the concept of racial microaggressions, but it's this idea that all of these everyday actions or indicators that we don't belong actually build up over time and like cause negative health outcomes, basically kind of like 1,000 paper cuts if you've heard that before. And so realizing or thinking about the fact that institutions were designed for white elite males, right? It makes sense when we think about why we may not feel like we belong, right? And so that image earlier of like, oh, sometimes we think that everybody else knows things and like we don't. A critical race theory take on imposter syndrome is really more about recognizing that we know plenty, right? But only a portion has been valued in academia. And the parts that have been valued in academia are, even though they appear to be neutral, right? If you honestly look at the generations of people who have been students and faculty and decision makers in higher education, they have generally been rich white folks, right? Rich white males. And so again, this is not to say like all white men are evil or whatever, right? But it's just recognizing that there have been power dynamics to recognize what is valued versus what people know in general. So we know things. What strengths do we have? I'll just share a few examples, a little bit of theory before kind of getting to more examples. But Tara J. Yosso, who's actually at UC Riverside, back in 2005, put out this idea of community cultural wealth. Not sure if folks are familiar with Bordeaux. I still like have trouble saying that name because I didn't study that in my business computer information systems undergrad major, right? Basically the idea that there is cultural capital that helps people to maneuver institutions, right? It was initially about class, but rather than this idea that people who are first generation college students do not have capital, right? Oh, thank you. Thank you, Richard. Rather, there are so many different kinds of capital that we have access to as a community, right? And that's kind of, it's not just that there are different types of capital, but recognizing that we don't do anything in isolation, right? We work with each other, we support each other, we tap into each other's strengths in order to get through. Yeah, and this is just to show that the ideas of community cultural wealth are rooted in critical race theory, but a particular angle of Latine crit within CRT of education. Oops. And so CRT shifts the research lens away from the deficit view of communities of color as places full of cultural poverty, disadvantages, and instead focuses on and learns from the array of cultural knowledge, skills, abilities, and contacts possessed by socially marginalized groups that often go unrecognized and unacknowledged. These forms of capital draw on the knowledges students of color bring with them from their homes and communities into the classroom. This CRT approach to education involves a commitment to develop schools that acknowledge the multiple strengths of communities of color in order to serve a larger purpose of struggle toward social and racial justice. So just to kind of briefly put my journey into context, right, my familial capital of knowing that I was Filipino, but not knowing what that looked like, right? That created a thirst for knowledge to understand, what am I even doing here? Like, none of these books are covering my history. None of these people on TV look like me, right? So familial capital is about cultural knowledge within and between family that create a sense of community history and memory. In college, so the next one, social capital, the networks of individuals and resources in the families and communities where people of color live and work. And so I found a sense of community in Cal Poly Pomona Barcata, even though it was an institution of higher education, right? And my parents did not go get their degrees in the United States. I was able to find other people who were going through similar experiences. Aspirational, the ability to maintain hopes and dreams for the future, even in the face of barriers. So even as I was going through my own mental health and substance use struggles, I aspired to believe that there was a way to prevent this for future generations. Navigational, the skills that are used to maneuver social institutions that were not created with communities of color in mind. That's basically what we're talking about today, right? And so the minority training program and cancer control research was that space for me that validated for the very first time that it's not just about if you're smart enough, but like we have a commitment to our communities, right? And I think, like, for those of you who are involved in the UpGrads program or other fellowship programs, mentorship programs, right? It's not like, it's not about trying to fix you, but trying to give you the tools to navigate these institutions. Resistant, the skills that individuals gain when challenging inequality. So creating the Health Careers Opportunity Program to basically do programming like this, right, that helps us find each other and talk about the challenges that we've been facing, but ultimately to create more affirming spaces for each other. And linguistic, the ability to communicate in various forms, including language, music, art, and poetry. And so, for example, this workshop, right? My doctoral advisor said he's not a fan of like conferences. He really encourages publication, right? But right now I am demonstrating linguistic capital to share my stories with you, these things that I've learned with you through storytelling. And also, I think I remember seeing someone is in the linguistics program. So I know some people do need to go, but maybe we can do 5 minutes of breakouts. So reflecting on what you wrote about your journeys earlier on, think about these different forms of capital and what forms of capital are you seeing? I'm going to go ahead and create breakout rooms. How many do we have? Okay, I'll do 5 breakout rooms of 3, and if you could share for like 5 minutes. kind of what different forms of capital you've been you've noticed in your own journey. Hey, y'all, apologies, sincere apologies for forgetting to provide you with the prompt. But it sounded like, oh, you know what? Let's just say that that was an intentional exercise in navigational capital to see how you can navigate without instructions or the resources in front of you. But thank you all for taking the time to do that. Yeah, real-time practice. Well, thanks everyone. I hope you got a chance to like talk it through again. Sorry for missing that part, but just to put it back on there, hopefully this is something that you can continue to talk to other folks about. But to kind of close us out, hopefully we can try to figure out together how we will find our way, right? How do we prepare for the journey ahead? From my own experiences, and kind of, I think the purpose of community cultural wealth is to realize that we have a community of folks. And if we don't yet have those spaces, we have the power to make them, right? And also kind of figure out if your concerns are just in your head, whether they're a structural barrier that should be changed or a necessary part of the process. I think I had so much imposter syndrome because I had not had any publications. And I think it was kind of a combination of all of these things, right? I probably didn't have to be so concerned about it because I don't need a publication to graduate, right? That's just thinking too far ahead about where I might get hired or not hired. But in some ways, it is also a structural barrier, right? How come we don't appreciate or acknowledge conference presentations in the same way, or we don't give as much weight to the practical experience of working, right? But also, now that I've gone through the writing process with 3 different manuscripts, sorry, 4, 1 got rejected, like, this is actually part of the process to clarify what our ideas are. It doesn't have to be as painful if we know other people who are going through it, and we can talk about the thoughts that are in our heads that make us think we're imposters. We can organize to change the structural barriers, or we can just kind of like sit with each other as we learn and grow. So kind of putting into context what we're talking about, if microaggressions are, everyday risk factors that make it difficult for us to navigate these spaces, when we bring in community cultural wealth, that can actually serve as a protective factor to help us get through. And an idea to counter microaggressions is really to think about micro affirmations. So in the same way that it's these little things that make us feel like we don't belong, right? Whether it's like, oh, we're actually older than other people in our group, or I'm the only one who looks like me here, right? Or I'm the only one who switched careers, right? Like there are so many different ways where we could feel like we don't belong, but but there are little things that we could be doing for ourselves and for each other to affirm ourselves. And so, one of the things that I like to do is to kind of preserve these little micro affirmations. So yes, everybody has to have their CV where they document all these accolades and like all those other things that are valued in the academy, right? But I like to remember the different things that I've done that are not necessarily going to make it onto my CV, right? Did someone send you an email that made you smile? Did someone provide you with useful feedback, right? So this is an example from one of my professors. I successfully got funded for a grant, but only after using my navigational and resistant and social capital to fight back that the student PIs actually should get compensated, and it wasn't just a learning experience that would, you know, not provide me with any funds. You know, we were able to change that, but these kinds of experiences are not necessarily going to make it onto the CV, right? Brittany, who is an alum from the Allied Health Academy and Cal State Fullerton, she graduated in like 2018 or 19, but last year on International Women's Day, she sent me this message, really just celebrating me for the work that I had done with her while she was an undergrad, and like continuing that relationship in grad school. And again, this is not to like say, oh, Erin is so awesome, right? But it's like, how do we remind ourselves that we have these other forms of capital that are not recognized by the Academy on the day-to-day? So I would encourage you to like archive your micro affirmations, whether you like take screen clippings and put it in PowerPoint, use tools like Padlet or Jamboard. Maybe you make an Instagram highlight, or you use a specific social media tag. Or, you know, if you want to go analog and like write it down in a passion planner or a journal, right? Like part of the challenge, particularly, and this is me speaking as a Filipino American woman, right, is that a lot of our strengths have been erased from the records of history, right? So this is our way to kind of take that back and like demonstrate our own strengths. And I mean, not necessarily that other people are gonna like read my stuff in a museum later on, maybe, but really just to kind of remind ourselves through these micro affirmations that we do have strengths, and even though we're not supposed to be here, we're gonna find a way to get to where we want to go, right? And yes, it's nice to come back to those things when you're having like an extra sucky day where you didn't get the fellowship, or you got rejected, or you know, so many things in life are happening because of the pandemic and because of all of these things in which we are living on a day-to-day basis, right? Like, how do we navigate all of this stuff? And I think it's through these little pieces of micro affirmations that we can remember why it is that we're here, and keep us going. So before you go, oh, and also stick around for some Q&A, but I know that you're probably used to this already, but if you could please complete the survey. Oh no, that didn't come through right. Sorry, let's see. Okay. It should just take a minute or so. But thank you everyone for participating and reflecting and engaging with each other and navigating real time what it's like to be thrown into something without like the resources that you know you deserve and you need. But it was really such a privilege to share this space with you all today. And yeah, if you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. You can check out my website. I don't know if this is going to go on my CV or not, right? But that's not the point, right? Like, I believe that all of you are here for a reason, and it doesn't make from an efficiency standpoint, it doesn't make sense for us to struggle alone, right? So feel free to stay connected, and yeah, if people have any questions. Oh, thank you. If anyone has any questions, I can stick around, but I think I'll stop. Oops. I think I'll stop the presentation. Thank you, everyone.